And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today we're talking about day 3 of the mandatory minicamp for the Washington Commanders. We're going to be talking about the key takeaways from day 3. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jayden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about mandatory minicamp. We're talking about day 3, and we're talking about the key takeaways. And so for this, we're going to be talking about what Dan Quinn had to say and really paraphrasing that. And we'll be throwing up some images here about the players and the coaches that he talked about. And so let's go ahead and start with the first thing that Dan Quinn talked about, and that is pushing hard on the skills. And so he was talking about just how the emphasis has been there for these camps to go out there and really work on the skill work for these players. That's something that the coaching staff really wanted to emphasize. And then next, he talked about the onboarding process that has been going on with this team. And so, just talking about how players have come in, learned the system, and how other players have really helped the other players coming in as well. And so he really was definitely impressed with the way that players have essentially kind of coached themselves. And so he talks about players really turning into leaders in that aspect. And so coaching other players up, like he was super impressed with that. And so next, Dan Quinn did talk about Noah Brown. And so that was something that was the key to yesterday's takeaway, in Noah Brown going down due to an injury after making a catch. And so he didn't want to speculate on that. The only thing that he said was that he is going to get an MRI. And so we don't have any other update about Noah Brown other than that he's getting an MRI. And so this is tough news to hear. I mean, still not a lot coming out about Noah Brown. And I've said this before with him. I thought that he was huge for the Commanders last season, especially for Jayden Daniels, because the season before he played with CJ Stroud. And so definitely I think his experience in playing with a rookie quarterback like CJ Stroud and him taking off was something that he provided that experience over to Jayden Daniels. Would love to see him out there for year 2, because I do feel like that he's the type of wide receiver that could be a huge beneficiary of just the playmakers that have been added to this offense. And so we're still trying to find out what an update is around him. But right now, Dan Quinn didn't say very much other than he is set to get an MRI. And so next, Dan Quinn talked a bit more about just the running backs and things like that. And so one of the players that he mentioned was Chris Rodriguez. He talked about how he's in terrific shape, and talked about how he's really slimmed down and putting his best foot forward. And I know we've talked about this on a couple of other videos about Chris Rodriguez and really that running back room, because I do think that that is going to be an intense battle once training camp starts, because you have some terrific running backs here. And I think that just any one of these running backs, if they get called upon, can really make an impact for this team. But there's only so many players that are going to be able to make that last cut for the roster. And obviously, we can only have so many out there for the games. And so we'll see how this plays out. But I did talk about this a little bit yesterday, that Chris Rodriguez did look pretty sharp in some of the clips that I got a chance to look at. And so next, he was asked about Jayden Daniels, and he was talking about the little things with Jayden Daniels. He was talking about really his footwork and his accuracy, and how he's gotten a lot better with that. And so that is great to hear that he's just getting down these basics and things like that, because I think at this point with Jayden Daniels, we know what he can do athletically. But, man, when you start to really tighten up, the footwork and just the little nuances like that, man, I think that he can definitely definitely take a huge step forward in this next season. And honestly, I think that that is what it's going to take in this next season, because I think that teams are going to try to make him even more of a pocket passer than he was a year before. And so that accuracy that he's already shown getting better coming into this season, I think is going to be huge for the Washington Commanders, especially with the way defenses are probably going to try to play the Commanders. And so that was good to hear from Dan Quinn. And so next up, a player to watch for that he talked about was Luke McCaffrey. And so I was super excited to hear what he had to say about Luke McCaffrey. He talked about really with him just showing up and now being locked into the details and the route running of the wide receiver position. And so we talked about this a little bit on a video ago with Luke McCaffrey. He's pretty new to the position because when he transferred over to Rice, he played a bit of quarterback and then he went to wide receiver. Then obviously he did well there, but then just getting into the National Football League, I mean, it's a new position for him since college, but then also too, it's a new game when you get to the pros. And so the fact that he spent the off season looking at the details of the game, like, you love that. But he talked about just really how much of a competitor that Luke McCaffrey is. And he talked about, like, when you match that up, the competitor with like these little details of route running and skills and things like that, he's like, that's where you are set to see a player, really excel. And so I'm excited for Luke McCaffrey, especially with the news that we have heard here over the past 2 days with Noah Brown and not really hearing too much. Hopefully he is able to go out there for training camp and he's okay and everything else. But if he does miss some time, I think naturally Luke McCaffrey and a lot of other wide receivers are going to have to push forward in the depth chart. And I think with Luke McCaffrey, here's a player that was with the system last season. Obviously he understands, and he said it himself, like, look, it's one thing to run these routes as a wide receiver, but it's another thing to understand exactly what your quarterback needs from you. And so it sounds like that Luke McCaffrey is definitely even on a better sync with Jayden Daniels now and this offense than he was a season before. And so that right there definitely it definitely points to a player that can take a huge step in the right direction. And so next, he talked about Deebo Samuel, and I'm talking about Dan Quinn, and he was saying that with Deebo Samuel, he was saying, like, the one thing that he needed a reminder of, or he got reminded of, was his speed, because he talked about, his ability to break tackles and things like that. But he specifically was talking about a play where he just, I guess, took off on like a fly route or something like that. But he was like, man, you forget how fast Deebo Samuel is. And so I can't wait to see how they utilize Deebo Samuel. I know we still have to go through training camp, preseason, and everything else, but I do think that, man, he's going to see a lot more opportunities, I think, as a wide receiver. Not saying that he's not going to be in situations as a running back, but I do think that Cliff Kingsbury, this offense is set to use him a lot more as a wide receiver. And I do think that he can see a lot of other stuff besides going over the middle of the field and things like that. I do think that they will try to get him involved in the deep game as well. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But I thought that was good to hear from Dan Quinn and him talking about how Deebo Samuel, even at this point in his career, is still surprising people. And so next, the next thing that he talks about is the coaches that address the players now that the mandatory minicamp is over, because now you have essentially 40 days before the training camp starts. And he talked about Wes Welker and Ken Norton Jr. going out and addressing the team. And so that was good to hear with what they had to say, and just really, talking to these players about really putting in that work and setting themselves up to have a good training camp and how that's going to pay off during the season. Obviously, you have two players that are very experienced in the National Football League, with Wes Welker and his, experience with the New England Patriots. And then also too, with Ken Norton Jr., here's a Super Bowl winner, played for the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. And so he's also got great experience with the Seahawks as a linebacker coach there as well. And so this guy has a ton of knowledge. And so, that is something that I think is going to excite these players as they prepare over these 40 days. And so also Dan Quinn said too as well that you got to have a little bit of time to recharge as well, and not just the players, but the coaches too. And so definitely excited to hear this from Dan Quinn. And that's really the key takeaways that we have from day 3. So looking forward for the training camp. And so we'll be talking more about just the most recent updates to come about for the Washington Commanders. But you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here about what Dan Quinn was talking about. Again, one of the breakout players possibly could be Luke McCaffrey. Talked about how Ken Norton Jr. and then Wes Welker talked to the team before they get ready to take a little bit of a break here before this training camp. Jayden Daniels sounds like that he's definitely taken a little step forward with the basics, the footwork, and the accuracy here. So that is exciting to hear. And unfortunately, we don't have too much of an update with Noah Brown. It looks like that he is set for an MRI. And so we'll be talking a little bit more as we get an update there. And so you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, go Commanders. And I will see you guys in the next one. All right, peace.